Oh my god, it's that time again. It's time for hands. Can you believe it? Yes. Awesome. Love it. Okay, here we go. Hands. Chapter 5. Let's start. I was staring at the ceiling in the dark now. I held the covers to my body tightly. A hoof brushed over my chest, and I felt something wet on my shoulder. Twilight? Omnibus, she mumbled. I felt her chewing on my shoulder. I sighed. Well, as long as she was just chewing on my shoulder, hugging me, nothing else, I could get to sleep. To be entirely honest, it had been a long time since I had someone else in my bed. Not for the obvious reasons, just for someone to hold as you sleep so you don't feel so lonely. I could live with this situation when put in those terms. Kind of like having a stuffed animal. E raised to A is transcendental if A is algebraic and non-zero, she muttered. A stuffed animal who talked about advanced mathematics and drooled on my shoulder in my sleep. I sighed and wrapped an arm around her, midsection so she laid more comfortably and tried to relax. Before I knew it, I was falling through clouds of cotton candy, tumbling over and over again. The ground rose up and I stopped, and I felt like I had been hit by a vertigo. Nothing was at the right angle. Not the trees, not the houses. Even the bees were flying upside down. Well, that's just silly, I said. I looked down at my hands. They were now hooves. That's sillier. I looked up at the sky, my eyes widened. It had turned red, and where the moon usually was on Equestria was Earth. And Earth, coming apart, pulled asunder by invisible hands, and then was squished back together like it was made of Play-Doh, and began falling. That's not good, I decided, and I galloped for my life. Outrunning a planet on foot, or rather, hoof, is generally not possible, and I got a good look at the continent of North America, or the pieces of it left squished together with Europe, Asia, and Taiwan, as it fell upon me. Lake Tahoe, the Hoover Dam, the city of Denver's Coors Field, the Forbidden City of China, and a dozen other mishmash monuments and buildings rained down upon me. I couldn't breathe. I gasped for breath, and I felt a weight on my stomach, and sheep wrapped around me. I tumbled and fell, and the weight yelped as we hit the floor. Blah! I gasped, pulling my head free of the sheets. Twilight Sparkle followed, coughing. We looked at each other, both suffering the effects of bedhead. There was the sound of a cleared throat, and I closed my eyes. Just what I need. Good morning. I didn't see anything, Spike yelled as he ran downstairs. Spike, it's not what it looks like. Spike, Twilight called. She looked at me and smiled nervously. I guess I, toss and turn a lot, huh? I held a hand over my face and groaned. Yeah, me too. Well, look on the bright side, Twilight said. He's not going to spread it around. Good morning, Twilight. I'm here for my book pick. Whoa! Rainbow Dash gasped as she flew in through the window. Never mind! She jetted right out. I stood up, the sheets becoming untangled. I was standing there in my white undershirt and red boxers, and I waved my hands frantically. It's not what you think! It's not what you think! It's cool, I'll give you 2 space, she called back. I sighed and looked over at Twilight. The purple unicorn's face was buried in her hooves. Ever notice how our lives seem like some kind of twisted joke? She grumbled. From the moment I met you, I sighed. My life is ruined, Twilight moaned, her hooves covering her face. Completely ruined. Can it be ruined after you eat your breakfast? It's getting cold, Spike huffed. We were in the kitchen having breakfast. Well, I was having breakfast. Twilight was moaning over her breakfast. Frankly, though, the more I ate of Spike's wonderful hash browns and scrambled eggs, the less I had to think about what we had to do today. I just needed some peace and quiet. What if Princess Celestia finds out? Twilight wailed. What if she thinks I'm easy? At that, I spat out some eggs and gaped at her. Easy? Well, what the hell does that make me? Well, Twilight tapped her hooves together. It makes you, a stud, of course, Spike said matter-of-factly. He scowled at me. Not that that's a good thing, you two-timer. Who's two-timing? I haven't had sex since I got here. Not unless you count getting screwed over by God, the universe, and everything in general as sex, I growled. Oh, come on. You're telling me Fluttershy is possessed? I bet you just made her mad, Spike huffed. Spike, that's not helping, Twilight insisted. And we didn't do anything. We're not doing anything. Yes, she's just freaking out because she's an uptight control freak, I said sagely. Twilight nodded. Yes, Hey! Oh, Spike said with a nod. That makes sense. Twilight scowled at me across the table. Uptight control freak? It can be taken as a compliment on my homeworld? I offered. Twilight huffed and crossed her forehoofs together as she glared at me. And I guess indecisive cowardly jerk is one too? Indecisive? I gasped. Why is that the one thing that makes him angry? Spike muttered in the background as he enjoyed his own breakfast of crunchy gems and milk. I leaned over the table and glared death at the purple unicorn. What do you mean by that? Just what I mean, Twilight accused, pointing a hoof in my face. You are so scared of opening up about yourself because you have issues with intimacy. I have issues with intimacy outside my own species, I replied. Oh, so you're a bigot then? Twilight asked waspishly. I am not a bigot. I'm just... This is new for me, alright? I said angrily. You can't go from my species as the only sapient one around to, oh dear God, even the cows have political opinions on this world. Twilight stared at me in shock. Hell, even Spike dropped his spoon. I tapped my fingers on the table, very tempted to just look away, but I had to stand my ground. Hey, I have a hard enough time on my own world as a white male. I wasn't about to be called racist on two worlds too. Thanks. Yours is the only one? She asked, in a mix of disbelief and wonder. I nodded. Yeah, we haven't met any other sapient species. At least, not according to general knowledge. I mean, there were other competing hominids on our planet thousands of years ago, but most of them were absorbed into ours or just died out, I explained. I sighed. So unless aliens make contact while I'm gone... You're alone, Twilight said, frowning deeply. Kind of, yeah, I said. We sat in silence for a while. Spike frowned. Well, that's actually kind of a relief, the dragon said. I blinked and looked over at him. Huh? Well, that you just don't have any. I mean, I thought you guys might have just killed anything that wasn't you, Spike said. I gaped. What? Well, you talked a lot about all your wars and super destructive weapons and violent nature and how you nailed your own god to a tree to die. Context! I shouted. Spike huffed, hopped off his chair and took his bowl to the sink. Fine, geez, yell at me some more, why don't you? The dragon snorted. He headed for the door and glared at us both. Also, you're both being totally stupid, and I haven't even been on a date, he snorted as he walked out. What did he mean by that? Twilight asked, blushing. I looked up at the ceiling and sighed. Not a clue, I lied. We went first to Rainbow Dash's home, in the hopes of setting the record straight. Graciously, the Blue Pegasus let us in, and thanks to the aid of a magic spell, I was able to walk on the clouds alongside Twilight. It astonishes me how easily I was able to write that. Walking on the clouds. It was hard not to keep staring in wonder at my feet as we entered the home of Rainbow Dash. So, you guys wanted to talk? Rainbow asked, giving us both a dark look. Maybe you should talk to Fluttershy first, What? Twilight asked flatly. Why Fluttershy? Because she's possessed, remember? I reminded her sarcastically. We haven't even agreed on that case yet, Twilight said sharply. Fluttershy's possessed? Dash asked, blinking rapidly. She pointed at me. I thought you were cheating on her with Twilight. You're cheating on me? Twilight gasped. I'm not cheating on anyone. I'm single. We're not dating, I shouted in exasperation. Nah, he's living with Fluttershy, so he's not cheating on you. You're cheating on her with her, Rainbow Dash insisted, pointing to Twilight Sparkle. No, I'm not, I shouted, exasperated. We're not in relationships like that. So you're just friends? Dash asked. I glanced over at Twilight, staring in disbelief. I looked back at Dash. Yes, I cried. Screw it, that was the situation, officially. Emotionally, I could work that out later. Assuming I didn't just jump off the cloud house from the look Twilight was giving me. Yeah, friends, that's our current status, Twilight said softly. I grimaced and looked aside. She's a frickin' pony. Get over yourself. Be a man, I admonished myself. Well, that's not interesting at all, Dash said. She giggled. It is kind of funny, though. It is not, Twilight said harshly. Not to you, maybe, Dash chortled. So, what's this about Fluttershy being possessed? She threw me out of her house last night for being disturbed about how she was being evil and mean, essentially, I said. Dash gaped. Fluttershy? Mean? You can go check out on the new Fluttershy for yourself if you don't believe me, I said flatly. Dash smirked. Fine, I will. She shot off like a bullet, her rainbow form a blur that receded into the distance. We watched her go, and then looked at each other. We then looked away. So, friends, huh? Twilight asked dully. That is the general term for beings who are close but not romantically involved, I said, clearing my throat. I see, Twilight sighed. Not that, it's... I puffed out my cheeks. What? Twilight asked curiously. I slowly turned and looked at her. Relationships can... Look, this wasn't easy for me. One, I'm a guy. Women don't like guys who are completely direct with them. Except when they do. And two, she's a pony. My brain and heart and other parts are kind of conflicted about everything. Can what? Twilight asked. Change? I was about to nod. I swear I was going to nod. Maybe deal with this. Tension in a way that adults would. Not like that. Unfortunately, as I had said before, the only screwing I was getting was from God and the universe, because Rainbow Dash slammed into me and sent me sprawling on the floor of the cloud house. Gah! Dash, what is it? Twilight asked earnestly. The blue Pegasus got up, shakily, and stared at Twilight. She said I was what? What? Twilight asked. Dash trembled and sniffled. A no-good, slow, pitiful waste of a Pegasus who was so eager to suck up to the Wonder Balls that she'd never get her chance, she sobbed. And I'm too fat, too, and... Oh, Rainbow Dash, Twilight gasped, hugging her friend, as she continued to stand on me. Now do you believe me? I asked flatly. Twilight looked down at me and slowly nodded. You're right. You're absolutely right. We need to fix this, she smiled broadly, and I know just who to talk to. Good. Can we go before Dash crushes my ribs? I complained. Sorry, Dash sniffed. I guess I'm just too fat. Twilight sighed, as did I. We'd done what we could for Rainbow Dash, but Twilight's mention of ice cream had set the poor blue Pegasus off crying again. I can't believe you said that, Twilight said as we walked down the path to the Everfree Forest. Okay, it was me who suggested ice cream. It seems to work on women on my planet, I said. What, suggesting they eat more when they have body problems? Twilight snarked. I scowled at the back of her head, as she knew where we were going, and I did not. She can go supersonic. I don't think her weight is the issue. It's not the issue. It's how Fluttershy affected her. You should be cognizant of this, Twilight responded. I groaned and rubbed my head. Seriously, I misspoke. I'm under stress. So am I, Twilight growled. We came to a rise within the forest, and in front of us there stood a hut at the base of the large, ominous tree. I didn't pay it much attention. So why are you... Oh, right. I groaned and smacked my forehead. What? Asked Twilight. The friends thing, I said with a sigh. I'm sorry. I'm not bothered by it, Twilight said flatly. She continued on towards the hut. I followed, knowing this was not the time, but really. She couldn't just go passive-aggressive on me like this. Well, I think you are, and I am, I said flatly. Twilight groaned, closing her eyes tightly. Yeah. Maybe I am, but you haven't made things any clearer, have you? She growled. Maybe if you gave me a chance to do so, I could, I said angrily. How hard is it to say? She trailed off. I smirked at her. She glared back. You're not innocent in this. No, but neither are you, I said flatly. Fine then, Twilight huffed. Next chance we get, let's be entirely honest. She held out a piece of parchment with her schedule written on it. Let's make it in 2 hours. Does that work for you? I blinked. Several times. What? Does that work for you? Twilight asked flatly, glaring at me over the parchment. I nodded quickly. Yes, it does. And we'll both be honest? She pressed. Yes, I said. I'll even shake on it. We did so. Twilight nodded. Good. We turned to face the hut again, only to see the amused face of a zebra with a mohawk and golden earrings. Twilight, at last you submit to the motion, to make use of my fine love potions. Not exactly, Twilight said. Do you do that all the time? I asked. Of course. Zecora is the name I call mine. Magic mistress of rhyme, she said with a smile. And you're the town DJ? I asked. No, my dear hominid, not quite, though I do enjoy the night, she said. Ah, what have I stumbled into exactly? Zecora's hut reminded me of the African art section of the art museum back home, decorated with big ceremonial masks, gourds, and idols all over. It smelled interesting too, exotic spices floating in the air from the gourds and the great big pot boiling in the center. I took in the scenery while Twilight explained the situation. Zecora nodded thoughtfully every so often while stirring her great big pot. To prove Fluttershy is possessed, my answer may make you depressed, the zebra said. Twilight shook her head. Well, frankly, there wasn't much on it at the library. I mean, there are several books, but without more specific data, they're not much help, Twilight explained. She looked over at me with a flat expression. Besides, I'm not entirely convinced she is. What, because I said she was? I asked with a scowl. Of course not, but Dash is prone to exaggeration at times, Twilight countered. I have had time to think on it. Isn't it possible you're all just overreacting? Dash was crying. I think that's pretty compelling evidence, I growled. That and she tossed me out when I wouldn't finish a massage. Oh, so you're massaging her, Twilight said, her eyes narrowed. I held up my hands. It was platonic. We're not supposed to discuss our relationship for another hour and a half, Twilight said angrily, holding up her schedule. I growled back. You're the one who brought it up. Oh my, given this new explosion, Zecora interjected, looking amused. Are you sure you don't need a love potion? Very, we both insisted. The zebra chuckled. Very well, my little pony and human. Trust in my demonic acumen. She trotted over to a shelf and retrieved a flower with the bright green and pink petals. If the petals turn red, then a demon resides in Fluttershy's head, she spoke. If the petals turn blue, then this is just some hullabaloo. Thanks, I said, taking the flower and opening my backpack's main compartment. Wait, what's that? Twilight asked. Oh, it's a hand cannon, I said. The Cutie Mark Crusaders made it for me. Well, don't put the flower in there. You might crush it, she said flatly. Fine, I said, tugging into a smaller outside pocket instead. I closed back up my pack and turned back to Zecora. Twilight nodded and managed a grateful smile. Thank you, Zecora. We really appreciate this. Yeah, I said. By the way, what happens if it turns orange? Zecora stared at me with an amused expression. Goodbye, you two. I wish you well on your quest, and your discussion of the rest. She gained a little smirk. And if problems you two have with size, transformation potions to purchase would be wise. Okay, thank you very much, I said quickly, ushering Twilight out the door. She reflexively dug her hooves in and looked over her shoulder at Zecora. Really? How much are... 1 hour, 30 minutes, I shouted. What makes you think I'm thinking of that? Demanded Twilight as I pushed her out of the hut. I looked back at Zecora with a tight smile. Thanks a bunch, I gritted before shutting the door behind us. I last saw Zecora's smirk. All the while, Twilight squawked at me. Back through the Everfree Forest we went, me striding along as quickly as I could, and Twilight cantering rather than trotting. We'd fallen into silence, though Twilight kept checking her watch. If I had one myself, I'd be doing the same thing. I repressed a sigh. I felt like I was in a BioWare RPG sometimes. Fun fact, I really do not like Dragon Age or Mass Effect. Anyway, well, I guess that's what life feels like. Twilight then abruptly stopped. I went a few more steps before stopping. I turned to look back at her. What? She was listening very carefully. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you smell it? She asked. I shook my head. Small nose, remember? I trailed off as I felt a prickling at the base of my skull, and something rumbled through my bones. Oh. Yeah, Twilight said. Run! She took off, and I followed as best as I could, just before something gigantic burst out of the trees behind us with a roar. I chanced to glance back over my shoulder. It was big. It was hairy. It had wings and a lion's mane, and above all else, it had teeth. Run, 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 run! Twilight shouted, and I did my best to comply as the huge beast raced after us. I panted for breath as I matched her speed, and managed to get out a question. Isn't there a spell you can use? I'd prefer to outrun it. She panted back as we fairly flew down this trail. The monster's roar carried with it the heat of its breath, and then another quick glance back revealed it was almost right on top of us. Not an option, I shouted. Then, Twilight cried, and a moment later the entire world turned to light, before returning to normal. I lost my equilibrium and fell into my backside, and I smelt burnt hair. I reached up and winced as I felt some of my hair smoldering. Ow! I looked to my right. Twilight was there, taking a few deep breaths. Nice trick, I said. I heard the roar of the monster again. Not as close as before, but definitely not approaching us again. Great. I think it's the same bastard who tried to eat me when I got here. Guess he takes it as a matter of pride, Twilight panted. She shook her head and smiled. Don't worry. I know a spell that'll take care of him and... No, wait, I said. I took off my backpack, pulled out the hand cannon, and smirked. Let me. Twilight stared at me. Wait, what? Look, I have a score to settle, I explained, as I loaded the cannon. You already saved me twice from this guy. Let me handle him this time. What? Are you crazy? I can handle this simply and neatly, Twilight said angrily. I shut the chamber of the gun and stood up, as the trees rustled nearby. Yes, but think of this as me as paying you back, I said. But, just put up a shield. This could get messy, I said as the monster came into view. Twilight scowled. You don't have to do this. No, I don't. I locked eyes with the monster, and it glared back. Oh yeah, it was the same jerk all right. He recognized me. He stalked for us, claws out, drool running from his fangs. It took me a second to put a name to it. The thing was a Manticore, a monster from ancient Greek mythology. Twilight huffed. You're just gonna get hurt, or hurt it. That's the idea, I said, taking aim. Come on, you walking flea bag. This is stupid and ridiculous, Twilight insisted. I nodded and shrugged. Pretty much, yeah. The Manticore roared and charged me. I smirked and took aim. Now yes, it was stupid. It was ridiculous. It was probably because of my anger with Twilight Sparkle that I wanted to do it. I don't deny it. But a man can be very, very stupid when he's arguing with a girl he's attracted to, and staring down a hand cannon at a charging Manticore. Say cheese, you son of a, I quipped, just before pulling the trigger. The gun roared, and nearly threw me off my feet as it jerked in my hand. The Manticore yelped and ducked, the shell flying right over his head. It then ricocheted off an outcropping of rocks, bounced off a tree, and flew right for Twilight Sparkle, whose eyes widened as her horn glowed. Boom! I had covered my face just in time, and I lowered my arm, heart pounding in my ears as the explosion rang in them. Twilight! She was laying on her side, horn producing sparks. I ran over and checked her over. She groaned, which I took as a good sign. She had her shield up, so she only suffered the shockwave. Stupid, she muttered. Stupid. The Manticore, seeing I'd missed and had essentially disabled my own teammate, growled menacingly as he advanced on us. I looked up and grimaced. Oh yeah, stupid. Okay, I was now holding an empty gun after stunning my powerful unicorn friend with a Manticore bearing down on us. Yeah, totally according to plan. Including the fact I was pretty sure I had lost bladder control, and I was now having to focus most of my energy on just standing still. Whoa, I said, holding the gun up. The Manticore paused and advanced and growled at me. Yeah, you know what this thing can do, huh, buddy? I asked, trying to make my false bravado sound real. Except at this range, I can't miss. Twilight groaned behind me. I ignored this. The Manticore snarled, putting another foot forward. I cocked the gun menacingly, and it stopped again. Now listen, I said. I'm happy to just let bygones be bygones. The monster growled, his teeth glistening. He glared death at me. Clearly, he was not willing to do the same. Because, frankly, I'd prefer to not blow your head off, I said, tapping the gun for emphasis. The Manticore growled again, cocking its head. It flexed its claws and licked its lips. Right. Except, you do know I taste terrible, I asked. The Manticore snorted, flaring its nostrils. Seriously, I'm absolutely horrible. You'd really regret it. The Manticore made several complicated motions with its claws, pointing to its stomach, waving, and making a motion I took to indicate meant it was full. Oh, so you're not chasing us because you want to eat us, I said. I glared. Then what the hell are you chasing us for? It pointed to me specifically. Chasing me? I asked in disbelief. You chased me when I got here. The hell's your problem? I'm the one who should be offended. The beast made some kind of dancing motion, holding its claws over its head. It clapped them together, then made a motion like something falling. I hadn't the faintest idea what he was trying to get across. Okay, I'm sorry. I tried. Really sorry for whatever I did. The Manticore snorted. I scowled back. I'm not blowing your head off right now, am I? I held the gun up higher. But I can change that. You've got one chance to get out of here. I suggest you take it. The Manticore seemed to consider that. It rumbled, grinding its great teeth. Its tail swung a few times. It finally looked up at me and snarled, its mouth closed. It then began to back away, still glaring at me threateningly. Sure, I said, never taking my eyes off of it. It retreated into the shadows, and I waited until the feeling of terror left me before I even considered lowering my weapon. I reloaded it just in case with shaking hands, before turning to Twilight. You okay? I asked. My head hurts, she groaned. Otherwise, I think I'm alright. She looked at me. Not too bad. Funny thing is, I suck at poker, I said as I helped her up to her hooves. She rubbed her head and nodded, chuckling a bit. Would have fooled me, she grimaced, and then pulled out her schedule again. Oh, well, it's time now. What? Really? I asked, looking at the schedule. It's been that long? I accidentally put it for 1 hour from now, not 2, Twilight said. My attempted delay resulted in a deadly glare from Twilight. I held up my hands. I'm just saying, you're injured and in a bad mood. Stop avoiding this, Twilight growled. I sighed, sat down, and held a hand to my head. All right, fine, I said. Twilight nodded and got herself comfortable on the ground. So, you said before that relationships could... what? She asked. I groaned and rubbed my cheeks. This is absolutely ridiculous. Well, she insisted. I was going to say our relationship could change, I got out. As in a romantic sense? She asked. I sighed and nodded. Yes, sure. I looked to the side. Anything's possible, I mumbled. So, you're being straight with me, in as non-straight a way as you can be. She let out a frustrated groan. You're so confusing. Me? You kept saying it was all for science, I growled at her. That's because I didn't know you were fine with anything other than science, she shot back angrily. I was trying to spare your feelings. Why do you have to act like you have to dance around or run away? I growled angrily and shot her a furious look. Why? Because human romance sucks. I got up, and before she could ask, I really let my anger out. You have to pose as some kind of alpha jerk to a woman just to get her to pay you any attention. You have to deflect and deceive and flirt and everything else. You can't just be straight with women. You have to navigate a minefield of awkwardness. You have to take her feelings into account. Be polite. But if you're kind, she'll think you're boring or just let you hang on to her to make her feel better about herself because she can't just tell you she's not interested in you, but she wants to use you. You have to want to bang her and make that your goal and use your psychology to that end, otherwise you're not a man. I took deep breaths, several, and paced around trying to direct my anger away from Twilight. She was quiet, and I risked a glance at her. She looked shocked. Do you think that's what I want? She asked. No, I said quietly. Well then, let me be clear, she said. I'm interested in you. I like you. I'd like you to be an extra special sun pony to me. Twilight blushed. I mean, just to go out and have fun and be close to. Really? I asked. Twilight let out a huff. Yes! There isn't an expectation of sexual activity here. You don't have anything to prove. She blushed and looked aside. I mean, we can't even get pregnant aside from a few times a year, she said. That doesn't come up a lot. Oh, I said. Twilight blinked. So, wait, you thought Well, I looked aside. Well, this was embarrassing. Twilight laughed softly. Well, I wouldn't mind, you know, she said. But, it's not like I get like that all the time. Right, I said. I summoned what dignity I could and looked her in the eyes. Well then, I'd like that. Dating, you and me. I pointed back and forth between us. Me too, Twilight said cheerfully. And if it doesn't work out, we're still friends, I said. Twilight smiled and nodded. Good, she shook her head. Now, let's go see Fluttershy. Right, I said. You're carrying me, Twilight said, eyes narrowed. I sighed, picked her up, and put her on my back. She wrapped her hooves around my shoulders. Yes, ma'am. Good, she said cheerfully. This isn't so bad, right? It's about what I've come to expect from dating so far, I said wryly. She lightly bit my neck, but it didn't hurt that much. We made it to the path that led to Fluttershy's cottage. On the way, we passed a minotaur being carried off by a pair of goats. No means no. That sounds good. Really good, he muttered. We stopped and watched him go, before looking at each other. That was Iron Will, Twilight said, the motivational speaker. Who started making your act weird? I ran in front of him. Hang on, pal. The Minotaur scowled down at me and stepped off his goat minions. That didn't diminish his height, as he easily had a head over me. He snorted in my face. What are you doing blocking my way, little man? What the hell did you do to Fluttershy? I demanded. You drove her crazy. She kicked me out of my house. Andrew, maybe we should tone it down a little? Twilight whispered. Iron Will snorted angrily. You should talk to her yourself. She was, he frowned, unsatisfied with my workshop. What? I asked, blinking. Yes, he looked over my shoulder. You can ask her for yourself. He hopped back onto his goats, who were looking rather tired. Go! He resumed his journey, as a familiar Pegasus approached. Andrew, Twilight, Fluttershy cried. Fluttershy, Twilight said. She came down and landed on the road in front of us. Pinkie and Rarity galloped up as well. I went overboard. I'm very sorry for what I did, Fluttershy said. I smiled back. It's all right. You're forgiven. I'm just happy you're not, well, possessed, Pinkie Pie suggested. Fluttershy blushed, as did I. Yeah, I said with a cough. In fairness, though. Yes, I wasn't acting like myself, Fluttershy said softly. She looked down at the ground, but then back up. She smiled. But, I'm glad to be back, she said. Yeah, Pinkie Pie cheered. Better than ever, Rarity said. She raised an elegant eyebrow at us. And what have you two been up to? Ooh! Pinky covered her cheeks with her hooves. I get it! She pointed her hoof in my face. You were cheating on Fluttershy! Whoa, what? Fluttershy asked with a blush. This again? Twilight asked flatly. No, he wasn't. I wasn't, I said. Then you were cheating on Twilight with Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie cried. Or are you all together in a single relationship? Rarity asked. That was Spiky Wikey's suggestion. Ooh, dramatic, Pinkie Pie said cheerfully. I've never thrown a party for a threesome before. Well, maybe once before. I sighed and held a hand to my forehead as a familiar headache came on. Yep, everything was back to normal. Twilight squeezed my neck slightly and rested her head on my shoulder. I blushed. Well, mostly. Welp, there's chapter 5. So I have something to tell you all. I may stop reading this fiction. Because, well, let's see, the other day I found someone. Well, actually, he found me. He came to me. There's another YouTuber called MultiFanficAday, and he's read all of Hands. So, you know, I don't see much point in me reading Hands since he's already done it. Unless, I don't know, unless you all really just prefer me doing it. I don't know. I'll put a link to the next chapter, and you can listen to him read if you want. And if a few people really prefer me reading it, then okay, I'll continue doing it. Because, you know, I don't have a problem continuing reading it since I do actually like it. So yeah, that's all I need to say. Yeah. If you enjoyed this reading of Chapter 5 of Hands, be sure to comment, rate, and subscribe. And until the next reading, everyone, farewell.